Residential Report Writing and Case Studies. Chapter 1, Appraising versus Reporting. Page 7. USPAP, Standard 1. Standard 1 of USPAP, Real Property Appraisal Development, states, in developing a property appraisal, an appraiser must identify the problem to be solved, determine the scope of work necessary to solve the problem, and correctly complete research and analysis necessary to produce a credible appraisal. The key word in Standard 1 is credible. The value opinion conclusion must be credible, defined as worthy of belief, based upon the data analyzed and the appraisal process employed. The appraiser must believe in the value opinion, for only then can the appraiser expect any other party to put confidence in the value opinion. 1. The Appraisal Foundation, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. Washington, D.C. Appraisal Standards Board, 2020 through 2021 edition, Standard 1. End of page. Page 8, USPAP, Standard 2. Standard 2, Real Property Appraisal Reporting, reads, in reporting the results of a real property appraisal, an appraiser must communicate each analysis, opinion, and conclusion in a manner that is not misleading. The key phrase in Standard 2 is not misleading. After forming a credible value opinion through the appraisal process as specified in Standard 1, the appraiser now is responsible to properly communicate the assignment results to the client and other intended users. This means, according to USPAP, communicating in a manner that is not misleading. Also, the ethics rule includes this statement: an appraiser must not communicate assignment results with the intent to mislead or defraud. The ethics rule reminds us that we must not communicate assignment results in a fraudulent manner. What is the difference between being misleading and fraudulent? USPAP has a new definition in the 2020-2021 USPAP for misleading. It defines misleading as intentionally or unintentionally misrepresenting, misstating, or concealing relevant facts or conclusions. We must turn to a standard dictionary to define fraudulent. Fraudulent, intended to deceive. The difference between these terms is intent. The definition of misleading says it may be intentional or unintentional. A report may be misleading by accident. However, in order for an appraisal report to be fraudulent, the appraiser must have intended to deceive. 1. The Appraisal Foundation Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, Washington, D.C. Appraisal Standards Board 2020-2021 edition. Standard 2. 2. IBID Ethics Rule. 3. IBID Definitions. End of page. Page 9. The appraisal process. Appraising is a problem-solving process, and the appraisal is the development device used to solve the problem. Prior to initiating the development device, better known as the appraisal process, we must be aware of and understand the basic principles that are incorporated into the appraisal process. The steps in the appraisal process include: 1. Identification of the problem. 2. Determination of the scope of work. 3. Collection and analysis of the data. 4. Determination of highest and best use. 5. Application of the approaches to value. 6. Reconciliation. 7. Reporting of the appraisal. End of page. Page 10. Identifying the problem. In order to solve the client's problem, appraisers must find answers to some basic questions at the time of engagement. Who is the client? Are there any other intended users? What is the purpose of this appraisal assignment? What is the intended use of our opinions, analysis, and conclusions? What is the effective date for this assignment? What type of value is required for this assignment? What is the definition for this type of value? What are the relevant characteristics concerning this property? Are there any conditions for this assignment that must be complied with? These questions are directed to the client or the party who engages your services on behalf of the client. Obtaining the answers to these questions is the problem identification process. It is called the problem definition process in some appraisal textbooks. Most of the information necessary for problem identification can be obtained by the appraiser through communication with the client. End of page. Page 11. Who is the client? In a residential mortgage lending appraisal, is the client the loan processor, the loan officer, or the appraisal management company that ordered the appraisal on behalf of a financial institution? Typically not. The financial institution would generally be the client in this scenario. There also may be applicable state law that specifies who is considered to be the client. Let us look at the definition of client as found in the definitions section of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP. Client, the party or parties, for instance, individual, group, or entity who engage an appraiser by employment or contract in a specific assignment, whether directly or through an agent. Your client may be an individual, a group, or an entity. In any case, your client is the party or parties with whom you have an appraisal-client relationship for this assignment. When you determine who your client is, you will also need to ask a second question. Are there any other intended users that will use this report? The answer to the second question may help you determine how much information you will need to provide in the appraisal report. For the Appraisal Foundation Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, Washington, D.C., Appraisal Standards Board 20 through 2011 edition definitions. End of page. Page 12. What is the reason for this appraisal? In other words, what is the intended use for this appraisal? Why is this appraisal needed? How is the appraisal going to be used? What sort of problem is this appraisal intended to solve? The answers to these questions will allow the appraiser to determine the extent of the development process, as well as the reporting format to be used for the assignment. As we will discover later, USPAP does not dictate the form, format, or style of appraisal reports. Instead, the form, format, and style of an appraisal report depend on the intended use and the needs of the intended users. It's time for another short quiz. End of page.